was going to say Opie and Andy, but no, that's not right. We're like bread and circuses of 2025. We'll give the people what they want.
Ping and Pong. Scooby and Shaggy.
Yeah. Scooby and Shaggy. Yeah, I definitely know which one I am on that one. Laurel and Hardy. Who was some of the Abbott and Costello? Man, we can go all day.
So yeah, we could do worse.
Two of my favorite crime fighting duo would be Riggs and Murtaugh.
Riggs and Murtaugh. I'm too old for this shit.
Starsky and Hutch.
You know, the terrifying thing about Riggs and Murtaugh is Murtaugh was turning, what, 50 in that movie?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, come on, man.
We're way past that.
Hey, money to be 50 again.
I know, right? I was in my prime back then. I'm just kidding.
What? Still working.
I'm in my prime now, pal.
That's it. Look at you, for God's sake.
Well, I tell you what, it could be worse.
Could be. Has been.
Yeah, it has been. Oh, man. I'm thinking of the three folks watching live. Tony has already jumped on. Tony, please put the link to your amazing freeze-dried foods up there again. Can't say good enough things about them. I know my brother raves about them to everyone within his earshot. So let's give you some free publicity this morning, my dear friend. Fast Groups, I believe, is the name of it. But Tony's gonna hook us up with that. Will Rhodes is on. Good morning, Rich and Dr. Fuller. Coin number 2269. Johnny King is on. Good morning from Kentucky. Man, we got a good show for it. Do we have an out today, Dr. Fuller? Do you have a time?
But I have a solid at 1000, but we're usually coming in under that, so I didn't think to mention it. But
fastgroupfoods.com. Yeah, go ahead and pick yourself up some biscuits and gravy. You'll thank Rich Brown for it because they are fantastic.
Yeah, I went to the site after our last show that we did together when his URL was up there, and I was really surprised by the variety. You know, because I'm used to backpacking foods from back in the day when it was, you know, glorified MREs, but
yeah,
not the case here.
Oh, exactly. Right? Chicken a la king and stuff. I tell you, there's a funny thing at the basic school. Whoever decided to name MREs back in the early 2000s called them like Captain's Chicken or something like that. And they would not let the lieutenants eat that.
No.
They were forbidden from me. What does that say, Lieutenant? Captain's Chicken. Give it here.
I remember the strawberries, the dehydrated strawberries. And I'm convinced, I have absolutely no evidence to this whatsoever, but I'm convinced they took them out of the MREs because you could smell them at 100 yards. When you were hungry, somebody crack open those strawberries and pour some water in those things and be like, strawberries.
Yeah. What about the 5 fingers of death? These, for those who don't obla, they had these. It was like hot dogs inside of a pouch, and you tear them open. People called them the 5 fingers of death.
They looked like glorified spam. They really did.
Yeah.
And that congealed gel, or whatever it was that was in there with it.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. It's like giant. We call them Vahini sausages here in Tennessee.
We, you know, when we were rolling north during the war, we would just, you know, all those guys were surrendering. I mean, in droves. We didn't have time to stop and grab them, but they were starved out, right? Because they were getting, as you well know, bombed by the B-52s, and the Air Force was just having their way with them. So we would just throw them MREs and keep rolling, you know, point south, and we'd roll north. And it was invariably the pork patties. Because we had stacks of pork patties because nobody liked those things. You remember those things?
I love the pork patty.
Get out of here. You did no such thing. That is a fib of the highest order.
No, I truly did. There was the pork patty, and there was the I think a beef patty too.
Beef patty.
Yeah, and hot water and those things, man. Oh yeah, I'm a Tennessean, brother. Give me some swine, I'm all over it.
Yeah, but back then we didn't have the heaters either. You remember? They had to heat the water on their own.
Yeah, you were on your own. That's a fact. My brother calls it chicken a la choke.
Your brother is not wrong. That's enough reason to get out of the Marine Corps and join the Coast Guard right there.
Yeah, Michael Gentile says pork for Muslims, wry sense of humor.
Well, it was that or lead, so we figured the pork was probably the better choice.
Yeah. Derek Gibson is on. Tony said, "What did you order from our site, Dr. Fuller?"
Nothing yet. I have to kind of go through it some more. I had a few minutes to kill, and I was like, oh, I got to go check this site out. I had been meaning to.
Fastgroupfoods.com. Yeah. So check it out. They got 14 folks watching us live. And without much further ado, let's give the people their bread and circuses this morning. That's what they came here for, Dr. Fuller. And we'll start with a softball one, really. I just kind of pulled some headlines this morning, and we'll just kind of chew on a few of the headlines going on. Like I said, this is a softball. Trump says China and other countries can't have NVIDIA's top AI chips. What do you think? Is this a big deal?
Well, they can't buy them, and they can't have them the normal way. That doesn't mean that the Chinese won't steal them, which is their preferred methodology, or simply buy the parent company. We've seen them pull that move more than once. So he's thrown a roadblock up. It may slow them. I don't think for a minute it'll stop them.
Not a chance. Not a chance. Yeah, they'll get them the old-fashioned way, just like the Rolex super clones. I mean, those things are indistinguishable from an actual Rolex. Even the dealerships have a hard time picking them apart because they are really good at what they do, stealing technology from others and ripping it off, and they'll do it.
We were buying stuff from the local markets in Afghanistan, like clothing items that were made by various companies who don't sponsor the show, so I won't mention their actual names, but they were made on the same factory lines in China that the ones sold in the States were. It's just they would run those lines for 8 hours a day, making the stuff that got shipped to the U.S., and then you run it another 8 hours a day, making stuff that they sold out the back door, and it made its way over to Afghanistan. And we were paying pennies on the dollar. It was indistinguishable. It was the exact same stuff. Yeah. Made by the same people, made in the same factories, just shipped out. And when you're working off of convict and slave labor, your pricing drops through the floor, and you can really afford to undercut the market.
Speaking of undercutting the market, I had some spirited conversations with a dear friend recently over tariffs. And I'm like, there has to be something that levels the playing field when you can just enslave people and work them to death and then manipulate your currency so you have an unfair trade advantage and you can just destroy another country, make them, and this is a tariff way to, the tariffs is a way to do it if it's done strategically. And I think that he's trying to do that because the Congress has abandoned the Constitution gives Congress the ability to levy tariffs. Congress hasn't wanted to do that since 1913. So if they're not going to do it, I guess the executive branch says, okay, hold my beer. I'll do it.
Right. And we've talked about that on the show before, that when they abdicate their responsibilities in the legislative branch, those responsibilities still exist. They still have to be addressed in one way, in one form or another. And so what we've seen, to my mind, is a grossly overpowered judiciary at this point. I mean, there's a lot of legislation going on from the bench now. And with this particular president, who has no problem whatsoever picking up the reins of power, we're seeing it there as well. So we're seeing a real expansion of executive authority that it's precedent setting, and it's going to continue. And as to the tariffs, everybody, particularly on the left, is losing their minds over these tariffs. What people seem to have forgotten, it's been a century of the U.S. letting other people tariff us,
right?
And us very rarely striking back. And so we've got a very lopsided trade arrangement, and that's the norm. People are used to it, but it's wrong.
I think you and I are both proponents of free trade, 100%. But it's not free trade if one side is levying tariffs and other things against the other side. That's not free. Free is when you level the playing field, and I think that's all that's trying to be done here.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to have an equitable arrangement when one side is capitalist and another side is socialist, for example.
Correct.
The basis of your entire economy is different. The ownership is different. Therefore, the pricing is different. The labor costs, in particular, go through the floor. And hey, by the way, the same thing is true for national socialism, right? I mean, as soon as you get the government involved in subsidizing and propping up private enterprise, you're on a very, very ugly downward path. And one of the impacts is, as we see, a very lopsided trade arrangement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brian is on from North Texas. Don Bothwell is on from Northwest Montana. Tony says a lot of Chinese knockoff Night Force scopes on the market several years ago. Can you imagine paying $2,000 for a Night Force just to find out it's a that knockoff. Oh, sick.
Well, but you remember when Holosun first came out?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was garbage the first several years, but they've improved.
But guess what? Exactly.
And now, I mean, everyone I talk to that is knowledgeable, they're running Holosuns because it's a good piece of kit. And that's what blows my mind about the Chinese. Look, why steal and do everything else? Just make good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You make good stuff, people buy it. AKs, you know, you may have a lot of problems with a lot of things about AKs, but it's a good gun for what it's intended to do.
Amen. That's right.
And, you know, the top of the line ones now that are almost impossible to find are Russian.
Mm-hmm.
Make a good gun, people buy it.
Well, and Michael Gentili is on here, and he knows a lot about, you know, the Japanese Lean Six Sigma and methodologies for manufacturing and things of this nature, and they just keep attacking it, man. They just keep going and keep attacking the waste and making the process better and better and better. And you know, why is the Japanese economy where it is? It really doesn't have a lot to do with their manufacturing prowess. It has to do with other things that we're not going to get into this morning. Speaking of not getting into, let's get into the next one here. Oh, this is an ugly one, Dr. Fuller. Have you seen this one?
I have not. Oh, wait, I did see the picture on the left. Yeah. And I saw that the company that put that picture out on the left came out with some sort of qualification, or they tried to walk it back a little bit. I don't know the ins and outs of it, though. I'd appreciate it if you'd explain.
Yeah. So this is some math teachers in Arizona, and their Halloween costume was this: problem solved. And it shows blood down the one side of their garment, or simulated blood. And they're saying, well, you know, because we're math teachers, we're trying to say problem solved. I'm like, really? With a bloody shirt that somewhat reminiscent of how Charlie Kirk died, and you're all way left of center? I don't buy it. And if you're saying, well, we're math teachers, problem solved, it's like, are you telling children to commit suicide? What is the message here?
You know, what's the problem you're solving?
Yeah, exactly. I don't. You could sell crazy somewhere else. I'm not buying this one at all, as far as what their excuse was. But I think this goes to show where we are. There's no sense of decorum here. There's no sense of right or wrong. That the fact that some educators would think this was appropriate costume for Halloween is disgusting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just, it's mind blowing to me. As you say, this is where we are. This is where we are, and we can laugh and joke. And hey, I mean, they had a meeting, right? It wasn't like one guy had one shirt. There's what, 6 people in this picture? Yeah. They had a meeting. Hey, I got an idea. How about we do this? What a good idea, Bob. Let's get Cindy, see if she wants to do it. Okay. Come on.
I love Michael Gentili's comment here. And as a free speech person, I absolutely agree with you. There's the conundrum of free speech is there's no asterisk for bad taste.
It's true.
Well said, sir. And that, you know, but there are consequences for the speech.
Exactly. I'm not looking for the government to go down there and arrest these people.
No.
But I have absolutely no problem with their boss firing them.
I don't either.
I have no problem with the PTA going bananas about this. I know I would. If this is what you're doing with my children, we're going to have a real problem. We're going to have a real problem. Because I want you to teach my children to think and how to think, not what to think.
Bingo.
Yeah, I don't want you in any way, shape, or form telling my children that assassination of a person who's simply talking is a valid method of protest.
All right. Thank you to the 20 folks watching us live. Well said, sir. Dr. Gordon Botson is on from Ohio. He's coin number 1688. Mark Hamilton is on from Ontario, Canada. Always have to have a Canadian on with us this morning. Tony says, and if you don't think our children are not being indoctrinated, look no further than that. Amen. John Shriver's on from Yukon, Oklahoma. Will Parker says, I was a substitute teacher for a few weeks ago. I was probably the most conservative person in the building. And that's in Montana, by the way, which is
saying something.
I know, right? I was probably the most conservative person in the building. One began engaging me about using force. I went into teacher mode, asking questions and explaining. And that's what we need. Socratic irony to walk people onto the target, right?
That's it. And it's not easy to do, because people will fall back on their bon mots. They'll fall back on their sound bites, and they get emotional. And as we've talked about on the show many times, as soon as we stop talking to each other, people find it much easier to pick up a brick.
Yes, that's right. And that's what, again, Charlie Kirk stood for, trying to have conversations, meaningful, thoughtful, adult, collegial conversations, and he was murdered for that. Alan Kelly is on, says, good morning, gents. Coin number 1571 from occupied Virginia. Hopefully not for too long, but here in a second, we're going to talk about Oh boy, the occupation that's about to happen tomorrow in New York City, but we'll get there in due course. I want to talk about the stabbing on a UK train. Um, so this is kind of the headlines this morning. Man in court over Huntington train stabbing and separate attacks in London hours before a British man charged after stabbing rampage on a train. And one of the things that's coming back to bite the British police is they put out a law, I think last year, that they were trying to combat misinformation. Maybe it was 2 years ago. It doesn't matter. In as much that they would have to release the name of the suspect, because if you remember, there was a Somali migrant that went into that Taylor Swift themed dance party and stabbed all those young girls.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was, they hid his identity for so long, and the place just, erupted, because the rumor was that he was a black guy, and he turns out he was from Somalia. And so they put out the say, okay, we'll stop the disinformation. Well, then they didn't want to release the fact that this stabber on the train was in fact, but he's a British national. He's a British national. He's been naturalized, but he just so happened to be a man of sub-Saharan African descent. Which, again, you can look at the charts here, and the data in front of you is not racist. It's just data. Do with it as you wish. 3% of Britain is black. And if you see the crime statistics to your right, there's a long line there. And I think this is the point. A lot of the chatter is, and this is the crazy thing. Just because you're naturalized into a country doesn't mean you're homogenous from that group. And I'm going to use Britain as an example. When my father had his DNA done, he was 98% from British Isles. 98%. He's probably more British than the British. But I say that to say it's no surprise when the glaciers receded, there was a place called Doggerland. You ever heard of this place, Dr. Fuller? You have. Okay. For those that have not, Doggerland was what existed between Western Europe and the British Isles, and you could freely walk into Doggerland. Now, there was a river that ran there, and as they dredge the English Channel looking for seafood or whatever, they're still finding reminiscence of fires that existed throughout Doggerland and arrowheads and axe heads and things of this nature. Where am I going with this? I'm going with this in that people migrated from Western Europe 7,000 to 10,000 years ago across what is long since gone, Doggerland, into what became the British Isles. Those are the homogenous population that existed for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Now you put people of Pakistani descent, they come from a completely different culture. And Western Europe was pretty much, although they were broke down into the Franks and the Belgae and all these other things, they were still pretty much Celtic populations, Celtic tribes. And I'm sure they had war with each other. I'm not trying to say that they were peaceful in any way. Then you had the Romans come in and Caesar, the Holocaust in Gaul. Oopsies. But where I'm going with all this is sometimes groups don't mix well for a variety of reasons. And if you're going to have truth in what's going on, you really need to have some hard discussions, especially in the UK, before it blows up in your face, because it's not looking good over there.
Yeah, controlling information in free societies is difficult, and it's just not a good idea, because most of us that have grown up with that idea of free information, free flow of information, get really, really grumpy when you start trying to manipulate it and start trying to spin it up. And so having done that right off the bat puts them on a bad light. But put the information out there. And, oh, by the way, you let all these folks in. Now you got to deal with it. You haven't done anything to integrate them into your society. We have this idea that multiculturalism is a good thing. And I'm not going to say it's a bad idea, but we have to be working off the same sheet of music. And if you're going to have a society, we all have to have some baseline agreements in place in order for the society to function appropriately. If you don't, then you're going to have conflict between those things. And I love the idea that all cultures are equal and they're all great. No, they're not. They're just not. No. And I don't say that out of any form of animus. I'm just saying some cultures historically have been far more successful than others. Some cultures in our modern day are much more attractive to live in than others. We see a huge Arab and Muslim diaspora over the last decade, they're not going to other Muslim countries. They're not going to other Arab countries. Well, ask yourself why. Mm-hmm. Come up with your own reasons, but do some research. Think about that. Where are they going? And don't be surprised that when they show up in one culture, bringing their culture, which has obviously failed them, or they wouldn't be there in the first place, right? I mean, if that
you got to state the obvious. Come on, man, that's absolutely right.
Oh, we can't say these things anymore. I'm a little tired of it. We can't fix the problem if we don't name the problem. All right, so they show up, they bring their culture with them, and it's no different than the jokes you and I have back and forth. Like, look, come here from California, that's fine. Just don't bring California with you.
Bingo.
Okay, I'm in South Carolina. I'm from California. Didn't bring California with me, other than my sort of chilled out attitude about most things. But if you bring that culture with you that has failed you, and you bring it into a successful culture, but then you refuse to integrate into that culture, you hang on to the failed policies and the failed culture that you brought with you, do not be surprised when there is conflict. And what amazes me, and we've talked about this before, you and I, is the folks that are coming in aren't shocked that there's violence. They're prepared for it. They're looking for it.
Yeah.
The people who allowed them in out of the goodness out of their hearts, because they're good people, they want to do right by other folks. Hey, look, you want to come in? We're going to help you out. It's Kipling called it the white man's burden, right?
Yeah.
And then they're shocked when they get punched in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be.
No. To
your point, that's historically accurate. That's what happens when different cultures collide. Just is.
Yeah.
And we've seen it with police officers. You look at body cameras, and you'll see constantly a refrain repeated over and over. The police officer comes into the interaction with someone with their lens, with their culture, with their upbringing behind them. And they're trying to be reasonable, and they're trying to be peaceful, and they're trying to work through, they're trying to de-escalate, while the other person that they're dealing with brings their culture and what they're used to and how they've been brought up into the interaction. And they're simply trying to stab the officer in the eye.
All right.
And how does that work out?
I absolutely agree with you. I think to your point, body cameras, initially I'm like, oh, come on, man. But it turns out it's going to be one of the greatest things that ever happened to this country, because I think it is destroying the narrative that was out there that a bunch of racist police officers, regardless of what color they are, because I think that Benjamin Crump side would paint every police officer with the same brush, regardless of what race they happen to be. That they're out there and they're the new slave patrol, and they're doing all this terrible stuff. And guess what? The body cameras show. A very professional encounter that, and the ones that are outside that get immediately prosecuted, rightly so, and those officers are held accountable. Had the recent Sonia Massey one, I thought was pretty grotesque. I mean, do you familiar with that one, Dr. Fuller?
I'm not. I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. She calls 911. I think she's a single mother of 3. I believe she calls 911. I forget where it happened at. So anybody that's on this morning, thank you to the 20 folks watching us. If you can give me the detail on that. She calls the police. 2 officers show up, white officers, and they search the exterior of the home. They see nothing. They come inside the house and they start wanting Sonia to identify herself, give me her ID and all this kind of stuff, which is kind of, okay, whatever. And she's boiling some water on the stove, and they tell her, "Is it sound familiar now?"
It does. This is going back a minute or two, isn't it?
Oh, well, the police officer that killed her was recently found guilty. But she says, "Hey, can you catch that water there? We don't want to have a fire while we're here." And this giant white officer says something really off the cuff. I forget what it was, and the Sonia says, "I rebuke you in the name of Christ," and she's holding the boiling pot. So rightly so, they're like, I don't know that I would have drawn down on her immediately, but as soon as they did, she puts a pot, she crouches down behind the things like, I'm sorry, and he ends up shooting her in the face anyway. And I know I'm getting a few things wrong, but it looked really bad, just for one, the way they were treating her, and then after she was shot, the partner wants to go out and get, start EMS. And he's like, basically like, what good would it do? She's shot in the head, man. Don't waste your time. And I'm like, so
that's what the videos are for. And we're great. And
that's exactly right.
I don't know a good cop that'll have a problem with that.
And bingo. I don't either. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. Right.
Exactly. But the interesting thing I find about that is, yes, we're seeing all kinds of evidence of exactly what you're saying, and it's still not moving some people off the dial.
True.
People get very emotional about this, and they choose their facts. They choose what they want to believe. Go back as far as Trayvon Martin.
Oh my God.
People still think that George Zimmerman was told by dispatch, "Don't get out of the car,"
or that he was given the race of the suspect immediately. He was asked the race of the suspect, and he gave it. You know what I'm saying?
And that audio has been in existence and freely available online for a decade, 15 years, whatever it's been now. And people still just absolutely refuse to believe it. So,
yeah,
getting people to change their, to slay their sacred cows is a little difficult.
Yeah, but that's what we try to do here every morning, right, Dr. Fuller?
Well, we try to at least give them the information.
True. Guile is on from the Philippines. Tony is on from Rhode Island. We also have Tony, and he says, Islam is not conducive to any other form of government. It cannot coexist. Well said, sir. Will Parker says, I'm a firm believer in cultural nationalism. Interesting. I think I'm heading your way on that one. Kyle says, I brought California burgers back with me. Doesn't that count? Yes,
absolutely. As long as they weren't tofu, you're good.
Yes, right. I'm a big fan of In-N-Out, man. We got one coming to Tennessee, and I am.
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
Road trip. Buc-ee's and In-N-Out.
Hey, man, Tennessee is crushing right now.
You guys are killing it.
You know why? Because it's a free state. Don says some cultures refuse to assimilate. They insist that the host culture morph into theirs. They don't believe in common ground unless it's based on their mores and customs. So true. And we're seeing that writ large. And I'm coming back to Great Britain before we move on to another one, because I want to bring everybody full circle with my comments. Johnny King says, this is so true. You cannot go to a different area code in my state, and the culture is very different. It's true. Cruz is on. He says, good morning from Israel, gentlemen. Incredible working trip with wicked warriors and warfighters. AWS member 1928 from Rhode Island by way of Israel. Semper Fi for you, brother. And God bless you for doing what you're doing, man. And as I said before, open invite to come on anytime you like, Cruz. Dr. Botson says he was convicted of second-degree murder in the Sonia Massey case. Yes, he was. Okay, so back to my point with the UK thing. And I'm going to pull this stat up here again. And the whole idea that, well, they're naturalized British citizens. Well, do you remember back in 2013, there was a young British military member who was off duty walking down the road, and two Muslim men attacked him and decapitated him in the road?
No, I do not recall that.
Oh my God. I think it was called the Woolwich decapitation or massacre or something like that. So they see this white man walking down the road. I don't think at the time they knew he was in the army, but they were just outside an army barracks. They run him down, run over him, get out, stab him, and cut his head off. And then as people start swarming him with cameras and stuff like that, they come up with bloody hands and try to explain that what they're doing is political violence because they're Muslims. And these two black men were naturalized British citizens who were Christians when they were naturalized, then converted to Islam and then committed this offense. So I think that we start seeing things that ring of that, and that's why people get spooked. But again, thank God for the law. Okay, you got so many hours to tell us what they are, but we'll see. But I tell you, I think the UK is sliding into, they may be in a armed civil strife, and that's another thing. There's a lot of British citizens saying they want to arm themselves to protect themselves. Well, you've already given up that right. Good luck ever getting it back.
Yeah. I saw an article not too long ago that said that crossbow purchases in the UK are going through the ceiling. I get that. I mean, you can't buy guns. Cricket bat only gets you so far. And a longbow takes years of training and practice. Crossbows, it's like a Polaroid, point and shoot. So,
as we've mentioned on here many, many times, you cannot even have a can of pepper spray. So one of the times I went to the UK, I found out there was this thing called Farber. I've mentioned it on here before, but for the 20 folks that aren't familiar, they created this thing called Farber marking dye. It looks like a can of OC, but all it is a water-soluble dye, just so you can identify the person that raped you or stabbed you. That's all the intent was, not to stop anybody, but I could give this to my daughter and say, look, as you're getting raped by a Muslim migrant, you can at least spray their face and we can identify them later.
Until they take it from you and break your arms.
Exactly. So we have at the time, and we still do, we have a London Metropolitan Police officer who's an AWS member. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, man, what do you think about this? Can I carry this one on there? And he went, and a couple days later, he come back. He's like, man, I've asked everybody. Absolutely not. You know, you're going to do prison time if you get caught with it over here. I'm like, marking die? Marking die. He's like, well, yeah. I'm like, so my point of saying that, Dr. Fuller, is, and this is the same thing for America. You know, we're forgetting the victims, and we're forgetting the citizens that are doing good things, and we're stacking up all of our, we got to do something for the suspect. And the case in point here in America, Javerick Whiting. Javerick Whiting, for those who don't know, down in Alabama recently, he is alleged to have killed 2 people and shot 10 or 12 others in a Mobile massacre. Him, and I think they've caught 2 or 3 others so far. So Javorick, when he was caught, and of course they got surveillance camera, they've got DNA, they got everything on this kid, saying that he was the shooter in this crowd of people, killing 2 and injuring 10 or 12 more. And again, injured by 9mm hollow points, you're going to be, your life has changed for eternity. He was quickly released on a $60,000 bail. So puts up 10%, so six G's, and he's back on the street. And the governor of Alabama is like, what in the hell? Because they just passed a Safe Alabama law last year. But again, you know, it's like everybody keeps pointing to that. And I'm going to throw this to you as a retired FBI agent. The Eighth Amendment, excessive bail, you can't do it. But it's like, bro, he killed people. Oh, is this not the kind of person that does not need bail? Your thoughts?
Well, excessive is the operative term, right? That's open for interpretation to the judge, right? What does he think is excessive bail? He gets to set bail. I am baffled by the idea that you can shoot 12 people and murder 2 and get bail at all, let alone a pittance like $6,000, $60,000, of which, like you say, you got to pony up 6. That's stunning. And to your point, and I've said this for years, you know, you lean so far over for the rights of the suspect that you completely abrogate your responsibility to the victim. And that's reprehensible. And the worse the crime, the worse, in my mind, the injustice of allowing this sort of thing to happen. And once again, it shows where the legislature is absent from the field, right? So the judges get to do what they want. Well, guess what? The judges in Texas are going to be different than the judges in Connecticut or apparently Alabama. And judges from courtroom to courtroom will change. I'm sure when you were on the job, you saw judges who were very liberal and you saw judges who were very conservative.
Yeah.
We had a judge up in Vermont. We called him Send Him Home Jerome. That was his first name. He's long since retired. But he had the highest pretrial release rate of any federal judge in the country. 95% of the people that went in front of him got let out pending trial. I mean, it was stunning. It was absolutely. We had a guy that brought in a freighter full of heroin, and a no joke, honest to God freighter came up the St. Lawrence, and it was going to get boarded by the Coast Guard on Lake Champlain, and started pitching 55-gallon drums over the side full of heroin. That guy, he got let loose before trial.
Isn't that unbelievable?
It's stunning. But again, the legislature could fix that. But individual state legislatures could fix it, and the national legislature could fix it. But they don't, because they can't agree on the definition of a woman, let alone how to pass a law with some semblance of bipartisanship.
Yeah.
And you would think the idea of keeping multiple murder suspects behind bars pending trial would be an idea we could all get on board with. Yeah. Regardless of party.
But and again, there will be those that will cross some sort of racial disparity in the if and when a law got passed that could fix this kind of thing. And it's like, I don't know, man.
You hear
something
that a lot.
Needs to happen. Yeah, you do.
You hear a lot about cries about racial disparity in sentencing, and you're much more likely to go to prison if you're a black male than you are if you're a white female. Okay, well, there's a couple of responses I have to that. One, do the research.
Exactly.
Who's committing the crimes, and then let's see, and let's see the type of crimes. If I commit a homicide and a black male commits a homicide, and I don't get significant jail time and he does, well, let's look at all the factors, right? Look at my criminal history, his criminal history, the individual facts of the case. But if all things are equal and I'm getting a lighter sentence than he is, then yes, there's a problem there. Is it a problem with the system or with the judge? I don't know. Systemically, we can fix that with legislation. Judgeships, different animal. But you've got a human system, you're going to have human problems. But if you think there is a systemic problem with racial disparity in sentencing, then address that. Address the systemic problems. Okay? And I would argue that a big part of our criminal justice systemic problem is simply the fact that we have a huge percentage of our crimes being committed by a small percentage of our population. And we're not addressing how we get those people from cradle to 18, cradle to grave even, in an environment that doesn't glorify violence, that doesn't reward criminal activity. And that is a difficult social problem to solve, but it's even more difficult when no one's trying to solve it.
Yeah. Do you remember when Roland Fryer, the African-American Harvard professor who did a study trying to find racial bias?
There's video on YouTube. I was watching it last week, as a matter of fact.
It's fantastic. And he's like, I fired my research team because they didn't, I didn't like the data.
Redid the numbers again.
Redid the numbers again. And he found that you're far more likely to be shot if you're white than if you are black when it comes to lethal force. Yeah. And, it flew in the face of everything that he thought he knew as a black man being raised in America. And he's
very clear in that video. I don't know if you've watched the video or not.
Yeah.
Of his own bias going into the research. And he's very clear on the bias of the people around him going into the research. And then he was also clear about people telling him, you can't publish this.
That's right.
He said within 2 hours of publication, he got his first death threat based on him coming out and saying, well, it's not like you think it is.
And it was but not a death threat from a white conservative. Let's put it that way.
No, but he's pretty open about it, which is shocking. I mean, usually you don't see academic types wanting to say, oh, geez, I went into this research with a bias and my bias was shot.
I think you should, if you're doing that kind of research, you need to acknowledge it up front. And I would do the same thing. I mean, I'm a human. You are too. We all have our own biases, and let's get it out in front. What is your null hypothesis based on that bias, and then go forward. And if it flies in the face, maybe you do the numbers again, like, damn, this is not what I thought.
Yeah. And it wasn't like he just redid the numbers himself. Because he had a massive amount of data. I mean, his data points were huge. And so he had a team, which was, of course, I'm sure a bunch of grad students, but he got rid of all of them. Got a whole new crew in there with ostensibly a whole different set of biases, a whole different set of personal perceptions and political leanings, and got the same results.
Yeah. And I like the way he kind of looks at it. He's like, when it comes to police officers shooting black men, he says they're aware of the social consequences, and therefore they're not doing it. I forget what he called them, Dr. Flo. Do you remember, like equity optimizers, or it was some kind of academic
cool phrase? But I got in a little bit of trouble towards the end of my career because I was very open about it. It's like, look, I will shoot a white guy much faster than I'll shoot a black guy.
Yeah,
much faster. And my boss was like, oh my God, you can't say that. And I said, why not? It's true.
All right.
Because if I shoot a black male, all things being equal, my odds of being on CNN and having my house doxxed and having Benjamin Crump down here climbing up my tailpipe are much higher. Yeah. Much higher than if I shoot Rich Brown.
And that's exactly what he's saying. And officers, specifically white police officers, know that. I mean, that was the case when I was a police officer in the freaking 90s, because we had just lived through, almost 100 people murdered over the course of cities burning to the ground over Rodney King. How many times was I called Rodney King, or people would scream Rodney King when I'm putting them in handcuffs? I've lost count. I mean, literally hundreds of times.
And then there was, what's it called there in Missouri? When Brown attacked
Michael Brown.
There was that one too, right? That became the Ferguson effect that Jim Comey talked about.
Yeah.
Some people here will get all triggered about me using his name, but he talked about the Ferguson effect. Officers were not being aggressive in their patrol. And what happens then? Who benefits when police officers won't get out of their cruiser? The criminals benefit. Who suffers?
And we're going to come back to this when we get to NYPD and what's going on with the election coming up tomorrow, because I think that we'll see some of the same thing when Zoran, or whatever the hell his name is, gets in. But because it's a foregone conclusion, folks. I don't know how you beat the numbers that he's got against Cuomo. But yeah, there was a white officer who had put in retirement papers, and he was literally weeping. He said, "We had a suspect. He had carjacked a woman. We chased him down. He flees from the car, and we're doing the polyester pylon." My words, not his. And he said, "I look down. It's a black suspect screaming, 'I can't breathe.' And there's 4 white officers on top of him." He goes, "I just immediately start screaming, 'Get off of him. Let him go. Let him go. Let him go.'" Because he's like, "I don't want to die in prison." And he was just tears streaming down his face. He's like, "The hell with it. Let him go, man. It's not worth it." This guy dies of fentanyl overdose, and I'll never see my kids grow up. I'm gonna lose everything I've ever worked my ass off for. And you have to take that into. That man and the emotions that he was showing there were real, genuine.
Was Derek Chauvin still alive? I know he's been attacked at least twice.
He's still alive as of this morning.
The last time he got attacked, he was stabbed multiple times. So
and again, if you watch the documentary, that was a department policy. The maximum restraint position was the position that had him in. Now, again, I will say, never did I ever keep my knee on someone's neck and they lost consciousness, let alone would I have maintained a knee on his neck when the suspect lost consciousness. Not ever, ever. But I still think that the George Floyd, I think the evidence show that he had a lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. I don't think he died because of the maximum restraint position, but he's dead nonetheless. And Derek Chauvin will die in prison.
That officer's fear is well placed, because it really doesn't matter to Derek Chauvin right now if he committed homicide or he didn't. He's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And by the way, how about the other officers that were on scene that weren't on top of Floyd? Their careers are over, right?
They're in prison. So, and the other thing is the civil rights violation. Even if you can skate out of the criminal piece, you're still staring down the barrel of a civil rights suit.
And potentially a federal criminal charge under color of law violation.
Exactly.
So you may walk on state charges, but the feds are right there behind you, and depending on who's in the White House is whether or not you're going to be hunted down or not.
And I think that speaks also to Eric Holder and Obama, when they really kind of went after a lot of these cases, whether it's George Zimmerman or who was the young who killed Michael Brown?
Up in New York?
No, Ferguson.
Or Ferguson. Oh, yeah. I've forgotten the officer's name. He's not in law enforcement anymore. I know that.
He wants us to forget his name. He actually changed his name and moved somewhere else. That's the level. But the 80-something page DOJ report, if you haven't read it, I'm sure you have. I know I have. It's they did everything they could to try to find this guy guilty, man, and they could not at the end of the day.
And that touches on something that I think also applies, and we see it in England, and it doesn't get a whole lot of press coverage or discussion. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday, you and I and Will, about the president didn't go down there and buckle anybody up. Eric Holder didn't go down there and do any kind of a study, right? They had minions that did that. Regular bureaucrats that exist in the organization, they went out and prepared those things. If you look in England right now, these policy makers are not the ones that are the policy actors, right? So who do you have out there buckling up people for thought crime in England? You've got regular police officers doing it.
Yes.
So what you have is, once these systems go sideways, regular police officers who've been steeped since day one of their careers in not abusing their position, not obeying illegal laws, being ethically and morally sound, still going out and conducting these operations because they're lawful. You still have to have those policy actors that are going to go out and implement these policies. And there's never a shortage. There isn't. And we've talked about it before. These guys have jobs. They've been on the job for a while. They've got kids. They've got insurance needs and mortgages and everything else. And hey, by the way, it's the law. The law says do it. So I got to go do it. And that's how you get these FBI agents that are now getting jammed up because
exactly
the guy at the top has changed. And his interpretation of what's right is different from the last guy's interpretation of what's right. May have been legal, but we're not going to let you stick around now. And we're pushing buttons in these areas that I really fear are going to give us real problems later on, because there are always people that are going to go do these things because, well, I didn't push the button for the Zyklon B to go into the room and kill those people. I just loaded them on a train in, Eastern Poland. All I did was get them from, the ghetto there and got them to the train station. That's all I did.
All right.
And we have these people out there that, don't self-define as villains. History will judge, I suppose.
I know, man. I saw one over the weekend where there's this little old man. He's probably late 70s, early 80s. He's sitting there like this on a park bench, and he's a white guy, and he's getting harassed by a white police officer in I don't know if it's in London, wherever it was.
It was the deaf guy or the partially deaf guy?
Yes. Did you see that?
Yes, I have seen that.
And he's like, did you say someone should speak English? He's like, and he's like, I told him to speak up. Like, well, they heard you say speak English, and that could be a hate crime. I'm like, what the?
How do you deliver that with a straight face?
I know.
Even if you did tell somebody to speak English, how is that a hate crime?
I know, man.
Let alone hate crime. How's that a crime?
What am I missing? Will Parker asked if I could put a link to the research, and there you go, folks, from harvard.edu. There's his Roland Fryer's empirical analysis of the lethal force. So please read that at your pleasure.
And look up his video on YouTube. It's
there's a lot of them out there of him getting interviewed, and you can see the shock and awe on his face of like once he was confronted with data that flew in the face of his own beliefs. It was an eye-opening moment for that gentleman. Tony says legislatures pass ambiguous laws that gives them an out while allowing the administrative oligarchy to shape laws using the APA. Whew, that's a mouthful, but he's so right. And there was another one I watched over the weekend where there's a bunch of kids riding their bicycles, and none of them got helmets on. And of course, the police round them up and corral them, and the cops are like, "Look, none of us here care. None of us here care about you wearing a helmet or not wearing a helmet at 15." And the parents were all there. They're handing out citations to everybody, and I'm like, "You don't like it? Call your legislator." Because it's what you guys said was important to make sure children are wearing helmets. Here I am. This is what it looks like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But at the same time, you have such thing as a discretionary authority.
Yep.
Use it. Because writing the citations and just saying, hey, I don't want to do this, that's an out. It
was an out. And the truth of the matter was they were riding in the middle of the road. But the only thing they felt they could really sting them with was probably the helmet law. Because that's what they saw when they rolled up on the scene.
And what happened to the days when the cop just pulled you over and chewed your ass?
Right.
What happened to that?
Well, you put yourself in jeopardy when you do that.
Right. Have a conversation. And then dad shows up and he's pissed off and said, look, Dad, here's the deal. These are the violations he committed.
Yeah.
I didn't write him for those, but I did tell him to get the hell out of the road.
Bingo.
Which you should be telling him to do.
Exactly. You should be glad I got your kid out of the road, but that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. Don says judges are proving to be more and more involved in politics and social engineering. I've been saying for decades that we tend to focus on the big seat political positions and forget about the down ballot positions like judges and justices of the peace. These lower level judges are the pool that higher court judges are nominated and selected from. Totally agree with you. And to your point, I remember my FTO saying, we all go to court on Tuesday. That's when Merrill City Police Department, we schedule ours for Tuesday. And I'm like, why is that? Because Thursday worked better for me. And he's like, well, it's just what we do. Well, I found out on Thursday you had a socialist judge in Blount County, Tennessee that, like you said, turned him loose, frickin' Fred or whatever his name was. And even when I had airtight cases and the guy's ready to plea out, he would be like, the judge would go, I'm not hearing your plea. Go away. The state's going to prove this today. I want to plea. I want the state to show their evidence. I'm like, why are you doing this? It's in his best interest. It's in the state's best interest, in your best interest to get this off the docket. And this guy gets slapped around and everybody goes home. But that's an activist to me. It
is. And the more the judiciary is allowed to fill that vacuum by the legislature, the more they're going to.
Mm-hmm.
We say all the time, nature abhors a vacuum. Well, it's true in the legislative space as well. If the legislature doesn't pass laws, don't be surprised when the other two branches of government start snatching up that authority.
Exactly. So moving on here, Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, and the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may very well go into that now disgraced country, quote, guns ablazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. That's coming from the 47th President of the United States, folks. That was came out last night. So, man, I tell you what, I do not want to see intervention in Nigeria. And I'm a Christian. I'm all about doing something for them. Maybe we need to bring back something like the Flying Tigers or the Rough Riders, where we have volunteers go and do some of these things. And still we don't have American boots on the ground, because that would be really bad.
Yeah, I read that yesterday, and I was like, really? President of the United States can't come up with a better phrase than guns ablazing?
I know, man.
That was a little juvenile. Hey, look,
come on, George Bush, man. He was the original.
Yeah, right. I like to see a little bit more presidential behavior in my presidents, but
get her alive.
That's just me. If they do go, though, maybe they can find that prince who left my uncle all that money, and I can finally collect that Nigerian prince. I really hope we don't get to this point. But I tell you what, Boko Haram's been asking for a punch in the beak for a long time. I mean, they really have. And they're not just out here. Occasionally we hear about the things they're doing on mainstream media. But when you really look at what they're doing, it's a Christian genocide over there.
Remember those 200-something girls that they took when Obama was there? And Michelle Obama, home, right? Bring our girls home. How many of them ever came home? I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, I'm not either. And the only way that they were going to come home was for some hard men to go over there and do some hard things.
Exactly.
You know, some people in Hollywood running around with a ribbon on their shirt saying, bumper sticker, wasn't going to get it.
Hell no.
But they felt good about themselves. So yeah, are they really looking to get spanked like this? Yeah, they are. Airstrikes, I mean, it's another panacea. They don't really have a whole lot to strike. Right?
What targets you got? Show me the target list. I'll laugh, So
you're going to blow down a village built out of sticks and mud that Boko Haram has set up camp in. Well, that's great. They'll either move or they'll set them back up. The only way you're going to really have a significant impact on these people is to go in there and shoot them in the face.
Exactly.
And, that's a significant investment in time and treasure and bodies.
Actually, this would be this is classic SF mission. Some FID, which stands for Foreign Internal Defense. Go in there, train up these guys as best you can. I mean, and do what you can do. And that's a small footprint on the ground, but there will be American casualties if you do this. I don't care how small the footprint is.
Yeah. I'd be really shocked if SF wasn't already on the ground there.
I'm sure they are.
Training people. Yeah. And look, we've shown a willingness to leave behind billions of dollars of materiel. Something like this would be, a few A teams, a few Special Forces A teams, and a few $100,000, maybe a couple $1 million in firearms and small arms, and you're going to have a pretty significant impact. Look, if Boko Haram is busy fighting other Nigerians, then they're going to have less time to go around cutting off the hands of men and gang raping women. So something obviously needs to be done. I don't know that it needs to be, the 24th Infantry Division rolling into Nigeria. Of course, I could be.
No, I agree, but I think we can and probably should do something. But to your point, I think that the target list is pretty. It's a few mud huts and what have you. But
here's a thought: the Organization of African States, have other African nations roll in there and take care of business. They can do that. They have the ability to do it. They don't. Are they as capable as the Marine Corps? Probably not.
Yeah,
but they are there, and they have a much more vested interest.
My brother brings up an excellent point that someone posted on X saying, if my church can raise $1 million over a week for addition to a building, then Christians in America could pay a mercenary group to take care of it. And it's just right. Our church yesterday raised over $1 million in a week for an addition to a building. So he may be quoting himself, and that's Crossville, Tennessee. So again, Christians, let's put our money where our mouth is. And I agree with you. You know, like Eric Prince and the boys, go fix this. Go read Four Balls, One Tracer about the executive outcomes in West Africa and how a small group with a Hind helicopter and a couple APCs could flip countries on a weekend. I mean, it's not that hard to do.
Not against enemies like this. Not against enemies like this.
Have you read that book?
I have not. It's on my list of books to read.
Oh, it's fantastic. It is so freaking good. Four Balls, One Tracer about executive outcomes in Africa. Whew, amazing. But a group like that, and these are mostly white South Africans that understand Africa. You know, they are Africans first and foremost, and they're incredibly well-trained cadres that were looking for a job after the Rainbow Coalition blew into town and fired them all.
I saw a bunch of them in Afghanistan 20 plus years ago, and they were no joke. And I was not, when I was out in the woods and ran into them, I was very happy to see them.
Yes,
because I knew that some competence had showed up.
Yeah, exactly. So a group like that could really solve this problem in a week. Now you don't want to see any video of what might have to happen to do it, but they'll get it solved. Speaking of solving problems with military might, Trump says days are numbered for Venezuela Maduro. Now this is an interesting one. I don't question my conservative credentials, but I have problems with the extrajudicial killings of these boats coming out of Venezuela. I find it somewhat troubling, and I may be putting me on the outs there, but I know my brother's the one that kind of cued me into thinking this through a little bit deeper, and I just don't know about this. We've killed 65 people, more than a dozen strikes on vessels that are, coming out of that nation. I'll take this wherever you want, Dr. Fuller.
My first question, is it necessary? Can our Coast Guard not catch these guys and then scoop them up? It's only going to take a little while before these guys figure out, hey, we just need to put hostages on the boats, right? I mean, it's not going to be long at all until they start grabbing people up, uninvolved people, and sticking them on these boats, and then they just keep doing what they're doing. It's another social problem at its base, right? The reason that they're bringing these drugs in is because there's a demand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If the demand was for marigolds, they'd be bringing marigolds in.
Exactly.
But they're not. So you got to address that problem. Of course, it's a huge problem, so it's easier to just sink boats. I have a problem with the idea of doing this. Just smoking a boat out of the water because you can. I get it. It looks cool on video, right? And with the bro culture we have running around in the Beltway right now, it sells, right? They all think, oh, this is pretty cool. But it's kind of beneath us. The United States is perfectly capable, and your brother Jeff can speak to this far better than I can, to catch these boats. Right? They can catch them. I have no doubt they can catch them. Or they just wait till they get all the way to the States and scoop them up at that point. Or scoop them up and try them under maritime law. Okay. I mean, you can come up with a whole bunch of different ways to deal with this. Blowing up the boat and killing people in the process.
Who did you just kill? Who did you kill?
Right.
Do you even know who was on that boat? I'm sure you don't.
And here's the thing. What keeps you from grabbing a completely uninvolved boat pilot, snatching him and his family up and saying, look, you're going to take this boat and you're going to go to this point and you're going to give it to the guy there, at which point we will release your family.
That is what they do. So you're killing these, in a lot of cases, innocent people. Now, the cargo is toxic. I agree with that. But, Tony says that the boats were filled with explosives. It would be okay then. Both are killing Americans. Yeah, it's a nuanced problem. And I don't know that kinetics are a solution to it. I mean, I think we could.
And to Tony's point, look, if it's a boat full of explosives, that's like saying, is it okay to shoot a guy with a needle who's going to shoot you up with dope, or a guy with a gun who's going to shoot you with a gun? Well, there's a difference in immediacy there, right? So look, if he's got a suicide boat and he's heading for another boat and he's going to kill him, then yeah, absolutely. Your options are much more limited at that point. But I don't think anybody has suggested at this point that these are suicide boats. The information that I've seen and heard is all that it's dope. Well, there's an immediacy that doesn't exist with the example he gives there. So I think you have more options because it is not as immediate a threat. Certainly a threat. Certainly has to be dealt with. No argument there. I just don't know that violence lethal violence is the first stop on that train.
Yeah, Tony has a really, and again, thank you everybody for your points. Tony says, I see the interdiction of drug boats the same way I see the interception of incoming missiles. Drugs are, in my opinion, chemical weapons of mass destruction. I see it as no different than knocking out a vessel that would be carrying sarin gas or VX into our country. And my sister died from drugs, so I'm in no way in favor of this crap. But I like your word interdiction. We have Coast Guard out there. My brother was on a boarding team, highly skilled, highly capable, well-trained boarding crews can handle this. And if there's gunfire, then they sink them. It's easy day, piece of cake. But just to do extrajudicial killings, I didn't like it when Obama killed Awalaki. I had a problem with that too. He's a U.S. citizen. We go in and JSOC can do a snatch on him. We bring him back here. Had he not been a U.S. citizen, I had no problem killing him for what he had done. But I think that these are things that can have long-lasting political repercussions if we allow stuff like this. My initial thoughts were, hell yeah, blow them up, shit, yeah. But I think the more I thought about it, I don't know that this is the good course of action. Let's go to the next thing here. So this is kind of the U.S. What are we preparing to do? Where we certainly are putting a staging ground together for a potential strike on Venezuela. What that looks like, I have no clue. Once I heard there's a lot of oil there in Venezuela, largest untapped, I thought maybe they need some freedom. That's just me personally. I'm just kidding. But yeah, this is something that we're staging for something. Ted says root cause, we, the people, love drugs. It certainly seems that way. I think Dr. Fuller is frozen. Wait for him to come back. I want to get to another comment here. Don says, I'm going to disagree a bit. I agree that some A teams ought to be on the ground if they aren't already, but we ought to use some dramatic air power in the form of AC-130 gunships, blasting the hell out of their camps and training. 100%. If we do know where those training camps are, I am absolutely in agreement with you. I think that would go a long way to punishing Boko Haram and maybe setting them back on their heels for a bit. And we'll see if Dr. Fuller can come back on. TC has re-entered the building there.
Hey, there we go.
Hey, he's back, folks.
Did I fade out or did you? Who got lost there?
You did, my dear friend.
Oh, well, my apologies to all and sundry.
Yeah, we're just talking about the U.S. is preparing or seems to be staging for some ground assets off the coast of Venezuela. What are your thoughts?
Well, Trump has a demonstrated track record of not wanting to get involved in wars and military campaigns. And so far as I know, his big military production of either of his presidencies thus far has been the bombs in Iran. So I see this sort of thing. And I go, okay, well, this is obvious precursors to invasion, and it's a smart thing. I'm hoping that it's still in his thought process to try and get off this road if we can, because I don't think we really want to invade Venezuela if we can avoid it. Historically, we certainly have a track record of doing this sort of thing in this part of the world.
Do you remember it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they were going to fire on a Soviet boat that was going to break the Cuban what is the word?
The blockade.
Blockade. Thank you. My God. Yeah. This Russian ship was going to run the blockade, and McNamara happened to hear the general, one of the sinks, going, yeah, let's go ahead and sink it. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, he's running the blockade. And he goes, don't interrupt me. The Navy's got, 200 something years of handling blockades. And he's like, this is not a blockade. This is language. This is political speech. What you're seeing here, it might look like that to you. This is language. So I think going back to this, Dr. Fuller, perhaps that's what we're seeing here. This is language. He's speaking a language that Maduro understands. I'm amassing a force. Don't make me use it.
Yeah.
And in the Marine Corps, we used to do these things. We'd be cutting gator squares out there off the coast of somewhere. And that's what they call them, gator squares, because you're just going in little boxes around
You're
it.
loading up the LPCs and
Yeah, and then we would do we'd splash in our amphibious assault vehicles, and you could see those diesel plumes coming at your country. And then about a couple clicks out, we turn around and come back, load up on the ship. Everybody turn your weapons in. You do that a couple times, man, people start getting spooked. The helos load up. And like, hey, we're not playing, man.
Right, but you also run the risk that some nervous 19-year-old on the other side is going to let loose, and then we're going to have a real problem.
Yeah, and it's happened.
Yeah. So, I think it's safe to say we all hope this doesn't happen this way. We all hope that we're not going to invade Venezuela, and that this is, to Tony's point, saber rattling. But the thing about violence, it should never be a bluff.
No.
Right? Don't bluff violence. If you say you're going to get violent, you better be prepared to get violent.
Bingo.
Because the other guy gets a vote.
Yeah.
And all it's going to take is one trigger-happy young officer or enlisted guy to plunk a missile out there somewhere where it shouldn't ought to be, or fire a rifle where it shouldn't ought to be fired. And, wars have started over less.
Well, that's why General Krulak, when he was coming out of the Marine Corps, he doesn't get the respect he deserves, because he recognized this and called something the strategic corporal. Whereas you could have a low-level non-commissioned officer make a bad call, and it has strategic implications.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're kind of speaking to there, like one nervous corporal, and we're at war.
And it puts both of these presidents in positions that they don't really want to be in.
And this speaks to the saber rattling point. Man, I tell you what, this limited U.S., we're going to start testing nuclear weapons again, and so is China and Russia. Again, it's like, I don't want to bleed over that too much, but stay tuned for more of that. Now let's get to, this is a mess here, folks. Oh my God. Mamdani, socialist mayorship will make New York a worse place to live in and do business. His plan to offer free buses and daycare, freeze rents, and create city-owned grocery stores are expensive and are all proven failures. New York City cops, so this came out back in July, would flee the job in historic numbers if Mamdani wins, the union leaders predict. Well, we're going to find out tomorrow. Let's see. How would Mamdani fight crime as mayor of New York City? 5 years ago, he called police racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety, end quote. But as the Democratic nominee, he says his views have changed. To prove it, he's pledged to retain the city's tough-on-crime commissioner, but his vision for policing may give her plenty of reasons to turn down the offer. Oh boy, this is going to be a mess.
Yeah, it is. And it's going to get to a point very quickly where people are going to become increasingly dependent on a increasingly broke system. And when I say broke system, I don't just mean it's broken. I mean, it doesn't have any money. He's going to drive a lot of
Dr. Fuller, let me ask you a question, sir. You're a smart guy. What happens when you run out of other people's money?
When you run out of other people's money? Oh, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But in the case of New York City, what's going to happen is he's going to turn around and tell the state, hey, I need money. Right? My people are starving. My free grocery stores need more food. Let's face it. If you had the opportunity to pay for your groceries or drive down the road and get free groceries, where are you going?
Right? I get the free. I know right now, Lisa and I shop at UGO or Sam's Club or some of these low-cost retailers, man, for a reason, right?
Yeah, my wife is a ninja when it comes to saving money and coupon and stuff. I mean, she does everything but backflips and wear a mask around here. It's crazy.
Mine too,
we shop at 4 different grocery stores depending on where we're going to save a nickel.
Same. Yep.
And so, okay, that's fine. But if you say it's free, well, it's not just going to be the poor folks that are going to go in there. I'll put on an old ratty pair of jeans and a beat up shirt, and I'll stand in line too. You're going to give me free food.
Yeah.
But it's not.
It's human nature, right?
Of course it is. It's not free food, though. That's the thing. It's not free buses. It's getting, people are getting paid. The guy driving that bus is getting paid, right? The guy pumping the gas into the bus is getting paid. The guy changing the tires and doing the mechanic work is getting paid. So where's that money coming from? And
he's getting paid a healthy salary to afford to live in one of the 5 boroughs.
Yeah. Otherwise, he can't live in the 5 boroughs.
Oop.
So he's getting paid. And how does this government make money? Well, it doesn't produce anything. It doesn't sell anything. It doesn't build anything. It gets money through taxes. Well, you're going to tax people, as you already do in New York, to pay for these things. Well, if all of a sudden all of these things that other people are already paying for individually are free, well, then your costs for the state and the city are going to go through the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I mean, it's very, very basic. I don't understand why people don't get this. But of course, what they're being told is, hey, there's a guy in a suit. He's running for mayor, and he's telling me everything I want to hear. Free, 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 free. And the police are going to leave you alone because they're mean and rotten. And we're going to give you free stuff. And, oh, that bus you have to take to work, we're going to make it free. And you won't need to make as much money because we're going to give you food for free. That sounds great. That sounds great. If I'm not a particularly sophisticated voter and I'm already struggling to make ends meet, hell yeah, I'll vote for this dude.
Tony says, and I agree with Tony, says, you mispronounced extortion.
Yeah, he's got a good point. But that's what's going to end up happening. The city's going to run out of money. It's going to turn to the state. It's going to turn to the federal government and say, you got to bail me out. And look, this isn't a town. This isn't Crossville, Tennessee, right? It's not 30,000 people going hungry.
Nope.
This is millions going hungry.
Yeah.
So
more people in New York City than the state of Tennessee. Let's be clear.
Yeah. So what I would predict would seem to be fairly obvious is the people that have the means will get gone.
But that's what blows my mind when you look at what boroughs he's crushing in. He's crushing in the most expensive pieces of real estate. And it's this suicidal empathy of the left that lives in these rich enclaves that thinks they're going to be immune to the damage that they're doing. It's insanity.
And, you know, hey, when the bread riots hit your town, then all of a sudden the reality is going to hit you. And I've seen some people make the argument that, hey, this is fine. Let it happen because they need to see the pain that this is going to bring.
But who's going to get the pain? Here's the thing. So right across the street from me, there's a microbrew, right? And we go over there. What's that?
It's a nice place. I've been there.
It is a nice place. And they now have food trucks on the weekend. So we just kind of walk over there and have sit around the bonfire and have food. Not a single Tennessee accent in there, man. And I'm standing there looking at, and this is Potato Farm Road in Crossville, Tennessee. And I'm looking at this tiny little parking lot. Ain't no Tennessee tags there. So it's like, you're coming from their failed policies here. And you're welcome here, but everything has to stay the way it is. Don't let me catch you at a No Kings riot.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about earlier today, right? If you flee the failed policies, don't bring the failed policies with you.
Yeah.
And I think in New York, they just have forgotten. It's simply people that should know better don't. Now, you can blame the education system. You can blame willful blindness. You can blame
suicidal empathy, Dr. Fuller.
Suicidal empathy, however you want to say it. But I think what you're going to see if this guy gets his way is some real significant problems. Real significant problems. Because, of course, he's going to come in and he's going to have to put in place the policy actors to make these things come true. So he's going to have to put in place, heads of busing and heads of this and heads of that see things the way he does. And they're going to enact these things. And they're going to cause generations of problems for that city. They really are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They are. And James is on. He's from Massachusetts. There's a lot of amazing patriots up there. Massachusetts is an incredible place, but the policies there have disenfranchised so many people. Our friend Andrew Branca fled from there. He's a refugee from Mass.
And now Colorado's driving him out. So you may.
Well, that was a silly
neighbor.
I don't know why he thought Colorado was, Colorado was purple when he got there, and it's slid blue since he's.
Yeah, well, it's Mama's home. It's where his wife and her family are from. So they went back there. But yeah, I think he's going to end up as a neighbor of yours here pretty soon.
That's right. Looking forward to it. And James says, yeah, we're surrounded, but I'm so sorry to hear that. And Mark says, I can't see Dr. Fuller in ratty jeans. None of us can, sir. You'll never see that. Michael Gentili says what he claims he can do as a mayor and what he actually can as a mayor and what he actually can do as a mayor are two different things. Yeah. And they may find that out all too soon.
Yeah. Because, he is one man. He's going to put in place all these systems, but there are going to be, again, it's the policy actors. He's going to have to make a lot of changes. And I don't know that he has time to do it. And in the meantime, when the place starts to burn, and you remember the 80s going to Times Square you took your life in your own hands back then.
I was just thinking about that. We went there in 1984. It was April, spent a week. And I remember seeing the garbage pile. There was a garbage strike. And I've never seen to this day trash piled up, 1 and 2 stories outside on every block. And of course, there was a lot of social things that I thought were pretty wild. And then seeing, Chinatown, which is cool, but at the same time, it's like, what if you have these enclaves of people like that don't want to assimilate? Could anything possibly go wrong with that? Well, yes, of course it can. Now, Chinatown's not an example of that. The Asian Americans have done very, very successful. Many of them came here as slave labor, and now they're the richest Americans.
Yeah. Well, of course, for them, Chinatown is a marketing ploy. That's what exactly. That is. That's just taking advantage of what you have to get what you want within the system. They're working within the system.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Dr. Gordon Botson says the good news is he will probably guarantee a Republican governor in New York. And I tell you what, that's making lemonade out of lemons, my friend. Well said. But the other thing is, I think he's going to be another AOC. He's going to be a darling of the left as he fumbles around there for a while. Will Parker says far too many folks from those failed places, along with the damn show Yellowstone, have effed up Montana. Well, the real estate prices there are out of control. The same thing for Tennessee. Oh my God. It's insane what they've done to the prices here, which again, I don't necessarily have a problem with because I may benefit from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My wife was looking just last week and called me up. She said, "Hey, do you know what our house is being valued at right now?" And I said, "I'm not looking to sell. I've got, we refied when the numbers were about the lowest they've been in forever. So I'm like, I'm not going anywhere." But she's like, "We've tripled our cost of this house since we lived here in less than 10 years. It's tripled. Good Lord." But it's to your point. It's people fleeing blue states. And
they're fleeing with their money. And remember, Gavin Newsom was coming up with a thing like, for so many years after fleeing California, you got to pay 16% tax or whatever it was. It's like, yeah, good luck enforcing that, pal. Extradite me back to California to collect that one.
Well, and I told you about what they did to the military members there for a while. If you served a percentage of your career in a California installation, you owed that in taxes. That was taxable under California law when you retired. So
oh my God.
So if you did 20 years in the Army and then retired, and you did 5 of those years at Fort Ord, the state of California was coming after people and saying, you owe us 25% of whatever you're making in retirement. 25% of that is taxable under California law. And they got away with it for several years before the judiciary caught up and said, no, you can't do that. But they kept the money. So,
yeah.
He can say what he wants, but he's got to make it stick. So,
yeah, that's I'll tell you right now. In 1989, when I joined the Marine Corps, I was talking to the recruiter, and he's like, "Well, we have 2 major bases. One's Camp Pendleton, California. One's Camp Lejeune in North Carolina." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to enlist if I get sent to California." He's like,
"He didn't mention Okinawa? How weird."
Yeah, I found my way there somehow. But he says. And he's like, that's our 2 major bases, and they're on the beach, and it's going to be great. You're going to be surfing every day. No, I'm just kidding. But he says, I'm like, it's a deal breaker. I'm a Tennessean. I'm not going to California. That was in 1989. I was feeling that, right? And but the writing was on the wall where that state was heading. And he's like, well, there's a 6-year enlistment where you're guaranteed East Coast if you want to take that. I'm like, I'll take a 20-year enlistment if I have to guarantee I'll never set foot in California. So, I mean, but again, it's like James says here, Massachusetts is actively messing up New Hampshire and Maine. Or Will Parker says the states around New York City, including New York, should send their National Guard to lay siege to New York. No one's getting out of there. And that's part of it. Like, that's how they learn their lesson. Like, no, you can't leave. No. This is what you wanted.
You voted for it.
Enjoy it. And Dr. Fuller, that's all I had this morning, sir. I know this has been a lot of fun. I've actually enjoyed the show a lot.
Yeah, we wander about hither and yon.
Yeah, so
I don't think neither you nor I claim to have a death lock on the answers with a capital A.
But
we'd like to give the audience something to think about, something to chew on, perspectives that may or may not align with theirs. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Kick it around, think about it, do your own research. Use this as just one of your data points because you've got to stay informed. You've got to know what's coming because, again, as we say all the time, the fight is coming. The only way you get through it is if you make sure that you are ready.
And thank you, Dr. Fuller, for closing us out so eloquently. And if you are in one of those places and you're saying, "Hey, this is looking like could become a high risk environment," we still have 2 weeks, and I have 2 spots left for concerned Americans that want to learn how to keep themselves safer. You can come and hang out with Dr. Fuller and I for a week, and Mike Seeklander, Justin Carroll, Will Parker. And we got an amazing 1-week course lined up for you. Go to Shooting Dash Performance, check out the training calendar, and learn more about the high risk environment course. Don says, thanks for the great discussion this morning, gentlemen. Good show. Mark says, thank you for another start to my week. Michael Gentili says, I'm fascinated that we have 90 years of NYPD and 90 years of the FBI, and there are still 5 families of La Cosa Nostra.
Yeah, they're just not that good anymore, though. Now they're just kind of laughable.
Yeah, they are. Rico is done, played havoc with those folks. Dr. Fuller, if you would, sir, please.
Once again, the fight is coming, folks. Be ready.